Why would you sit with me?
Because no one should watch the stars alone.
Corporal Dax Mercer had been stationed aboard the ISV Meridian long enough to know the rhythms of the mess hall the way a sailor knows the tides. He knew that Lieutenant Yasha always took the corner table near the water recycler. He knew that Engineer Pratt ate standing up because she claimed chairs made her too comfortable to think. And he knew that the coffee dispenser on the far left ran 2 degrees hotter than the others. He also knew about the Velhari girl. She had started appearing in the mess hall exactly 22 days ago. Always at 1300 hours. Always alone. She would collect her tray from the auto dispenser. Whatever the ship's nutrient synthesizer had assembled for non-human metabolisms. And carry it to the same table. Tucked beneath the viewport on the port side. Where the stars moved slowly past like scattered salt on black velvet. She sat with her back to the room. The Velhari were a quiet people. That much everyone on the ship had been briefed on. Small. Gray-skinned. With wide dark eyes built for low-light environments. And ears that came to gentle points. They communicated in layered tones that the universal translator handled with only 70% accuracy on a good day. The Meridian carried 3 Velhari as part of the Galactic Coalition's Interspecies Integration Initiative. A diplomatic experiment dressed up in military language. Most of the human crew treated them with cautious politeness. Not cruel. Not hostile. Just careful. Distant. The kind of distant that, after 3 weeks, starts to feel a great deal like loneliness. Dax noticed because Dax noticed things. It was the same part of his brain that had kept him alive in 3 combat zones. He noticed the way the girl angled her tray slightly toward the viewport each day. He noticed the way her ears flattened when the mess hall got loud. He noticed that in 22 days, not a single member of the crew had sat at her table. Not one. Her name, he eventually learned, was Ensign Vel. Though even that was only a shortened approximation of a name that required a tonal range human vocal cords could not produce. On the morning of day 23, Dax thought about it. The way you think about something you have been avoiding. Suddenly. And all at once. He thought about a kid version of himself. Eating alone in a school cafeteria after his family moved to a new colony station. The loneliness had a specific texture. It was different from just being alone. It was being surrounded by people and still alone. That was the kind that got into your bones. Dax picked up his tray. He walked past his usual table, where Sergeant Hollis was already telling some story with his hands. He kept walking. Across the mess hall. Past the noise. Past the easy conversations. Until he reached the portside viewport. Dax set his tray down across from Ensign Vel. She went very still. The Velhari equivalent of a flinch, he would later learn. A freeze response. A holding of breath. A bracing. Her wide dark eyes came up slowly. The way you look at something you expect to disappoint you. Dax sat down. He unwrapped his protein bar. Snapped it in half. And set one piece on the edge of her tray without saying anything. Then he looked out the viewport at the stars. For a long moment nothing happened. Then very quietly Ensign Vel made a sound. The translator clipped to Dax's collar hummed for a second, cycling through its pattern recognition. Then it produced a single word with 73% confidence. Why? Dax considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. He looked at the half-protein bar sitting on her tray. He looked at the stars outside. Then he shrugged one shoulder. Because the view's better over here, he said. The translator worked. Vel looked at the viewport. Then back at him. Dax could not fully read her expression. Velhari faces were structured differently. The emotional cues lived in the ears. And the subtle coloring at the edges of the jaw. But something in it reminded him of a door. A door that had been closed for a long time. And someone had finally tried the handle. She did not take the protein bar. But she did not move her tray away from it either. They sat in silence for 6 minutes. Dax knew because he glanced at the clock on the wall without meaning to. 6 minutes. 2 people eating across from each other. Looking at stars. And somehow, it was the least awkward silence Dax had experienced in 3 years of military service. On day 24 he sat down again. This time she was there when he arrived. And her ears did not flatten. Dax brought 2 cups of coffee from the hot side dispenser, and the closest approximation the synthesizer offered for Velhari pallets. Something that smelled faintly of copper and pine. He set the second cup near her tray without ceremony. She looked at it. She looked at him. The translator produced. You remembered, Dax said. Hard to forget. It smells like a forest fire in a hardware store. The translator struggled with that. Vel tilted her head at a particular angle. And then very softly she made a sound. The translator flagged it as laughter. Low confidence. 61%. Dax grinned into his coffee. By the end of the second week they had developed a routine. She would arrive first. He would bring the drinks. They would eat in quiet for a while. And then the conversation would start. Careful. Halting. Translator mediated. Occasionally absurd. Sometimes the software missed context and produced something like, the ship's ceiling is emotionally significant, instead of whatever Vel had actually said. But they worked at it. They course-corrected. They started to learn each other around the edges of the language gap. Dax learned that Vel had been assigned to the Meridian as a technical liaison. Her specialty was crystalline data architecture, something the Coalition's human engineers were still years behind understanding. He learned that she found human music baffling, but had spent 3 days listening to old jazz recordings because something in the rhythm felt like organized breathing. He learned that her instructors had warned her humans were unpredictably warm, and she had not known whether that was a caution or a gift. Vel learned that Dax took his coffee too hot because he was always in a hurry. She learned that he had burned his tongue enough times that the nerve endings surrendered. She learned that he had a sister back on Earth. A sister who sent holophotos of her garden with enthusiastic captions. And she learned that he had sat down on day 23 because he had done the math, and decided 3 weeks was too long for anyone to eat alone. You counted, Vel said one afternoon. The translator had gotten better between them. Or maybe they had both gotten better at working with it. Her voice carried a tone the software flagged as curious. Possibly moved. 22 days, Dax said. Give or take. Her ears did something he had started to recognize as softness. On my world, she said slowly, choosing the words with care, there is a concept. A word for the person who crosses a space that everyone else has agreed not to cross. She paused. The translator hummed. We do not have a simple version in your language. Dax asked, what does it mean? Vel was quiet for a moment, looking at the stars. Then she said, it means something close to. The one who did not decide the distance was permanent. Dax thought about that for a while. Outside the viewport, the stars moved in their slow, indifferent sweep. The mess hall buzzed behind them with conversation. The clatter of trays. And Sergeant Hollis telling another story with his hands. At the portside table, beneath the window where the universe stretched endlessly in every direction, a man and an alien sat across from each other and finished their lunch. Dax picked up his coffee. Vel picked up hers. Some distances, it turns out, are shorter than they look. And that is the thing about humans that the universe never quite expects. We do not conquer with weapons alone. We do not win with strategy alone. Sometimes we win by simply sitting down. By refusing to let someone eat alone for one more day. By crossing a distance everyone else decided was permanent. Vel did not need a hero. She did not need a speech. She needed someone to say without words, you are not invisible. I see you. And I am staying. That is humanity at its finest. Not the wars we fight. Not the stars we reach. But the quiet moments. The half-protein bar. The cup of strange coffee. The seat across from someone the world forgot. Those moments? That is what makes us worth knowing. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you have ever been the one sitting alone, just know. Someone is still walking over. They just have not arrived yet. Subscribe for more HFY Sci-Fi stories.